Think about the last time you had a conversation where you felt truly, deeply understood. Not a conversation where someone just nodded and said, "Aha." Not a conversation where the other person was just waiting for you to stop talking so they could give their opinion. I mean a moment where another human being completely suspended their own ego, stepped into your world, and gave you 100% of their undivided attention. If you are like most people in the modern world, you probably have to think back a very long time to remember a moment like that. Welcome to the Book Vault, the essence of every book, How to Listen with Intention by social interaction specialist Patrick King. We live in the most connected era in human history, yet loneliness is at an all-time high. Why? Because we have forgotten how to listen. Society teaches us how to speak. We take classes on public speaking, debate, and persuasion. We are taught that the person talking is the person in power. But Patrick King reveals a brutal truth: most of us do not listen. We just wait for our turn to speak. True listening is not a passive activity. It is a highly active, intentional psychological skill. It is the ultimate foundation of saving marriages, leading corporate teams, and building unbreakable friendships. Chapter 1: The Epidemic of Fake Listening. If you want to master the art of human connection, you must first face a very uncomfortable truth about your own behavior. Hearing is a biological function. Your ears pick up sound waves. Listening is a psychological choice. It requires intention. Patrick King points out that the vast majority of our daily conversations are not actually conversations. They are just two people taking turns giving monologues. Why are we so bad at listening? Because the human ego is incredibly loud. When someone else is talking, our brain is usually doing one of three things. 1. Preparing the rebuttal. We are actively disagreeing with them in our head, formulating our argument so we can attack their point the second they take a breath. 2. The "me too" hijack. They are telling a story, and we are frantically searching our own memory for a similar, and better, story about ourselves to share. 3. Daydreaming. We are nodding our heads like bobblehead dolls, but our mind is completely elsewhere, thinking about what we are going to eat for dinner or an email we need to send. In all three of these scenarios, you are physically present, but psychologically absent. You are fake listening. Fake listening destroys trust. Human beings possess a highly evolved, subconscious radar for authenticity. Even if you are nodding your head, maintaining eye contact, and saying, "Wow," the other person's nervous system knows that you are not truly with them. They can feel the disconnect. When people feel that they are not being heard, they shut down. They stop sharing their true feelings. In a corporate environment, this leads to employees hiding massive mistakes from their managers. In a marriage, it leads to silent resentment and divorce. To become a master listener, you must make a radical, intentional choice. You must temporarily silence your own ego. You must enter the conversation with the assumption that the other person has something fascinating to say, and your only job is to discover what it is. Chapter 2: Conversational Narcissism. Patrick King introduces a concept originally developed by sociologist Charles Derber. It is the most common, toxic, and invisible habit in modern communication. It is called conversational narcissism. Conversational narcissism is the desire to steer the focus of the conversation back to yourself. We usually do not even realize we are doing it. We often do it because we think we are being helpful or showing empathy. To cure conversational narcissism, you must understand the difference between the shift response and the support response. The shift response is a conversational maneuver where you take the spotlight off the other person and shift it back onto yourself. Look at the example we just heard at the coffee shop. Your friend says, "My boss humiliated me today." You reply, "I know how you feel. My boss did that to me last week." You probably thought you were showing empathy. You thought you were relating to them. But structurally, you just hijacked the conversation. You stole the microphone. You took a moment of their vulnerability and made it entirely about you and your boss. Now, instead of processing their pain, your friend has to sit there and listen to your story. The shift response kills emotional intimacy instantly. The master listener uses the support response. A support response is a conversational maneuver that keeps the spotlight strictly on the speaker. It encourages them to go deeper into their own experience. It demonstrates that you are perfectly comfortable keeping your own ego out of the conversation. Let's replay the coffee shop scenario using a support response. Your friend says, "My boss humiliated me today." You reply, "Oh my God. That sounds awful. What exactly did he say to you?" Or you say, "I am so sorry. How did the rest of the team react when he did that?" Look at the difference. You did not bring up your own life. You did not try to match their pain with your own story. You simply handed the microphone back to them, and asked them to tell you more. When you use the support response, the other person feels a massive wave of psychological relief. They realize they do not have to fight you for airtime. They feel safe. Chapter 3: The 4 Hidden Blocks to Listening. You know you need to silence your ego. You know you need to use the support response. But the human brain is incredibly stubborn. Patrick King warns that even when we try to listen intentionally, we often fall victim to 4 subconscious psychological blocks. If you do not drag these blocks into the light of awareness, they will constantly sabotage your ability to connect. Mind reading is when you ignore what the person is actually saying because you are too busy trying to figure out their hidden agenda. Instead of listening to your spouse tell you about their day, you are analyzing their tone of voice, thinking, "Why are they telling me this? Are they mad at me about last night? Are they trying to make me feel guilty?" When you are mind reading, you are not listening to the speaker, you are listening to your own paranoid internal monologue. You are treating the conversation like a chess match instead of a connection. The cure: take people at face value. Stop projecting your own insecurities onto their words. This is the most common block in corporate environments and arguments. While the other person is speaking, you look like you are listening, but your brain is aggressively drafting your next point. You are thinking, "Okay, as soon as he finishes that sentence, I'm going to bring up the Q3 budget report and prove him wrong." Because your cognitive energy is tied up in rehearsing your own script, you literally cannot process the information they are giving you. You miss their nuance. You miss their hesitation. The cure: trust yourself. You do not need a perfectly rehearsed script to have a conversation. Let go of the preparation. Listen entirely, and allow a natural pause of silence to happen before you formulate your response. Filtering is selective listening. You listen just enough to hear the specific piece of information you care about, and your brain completely deletes the rest. If you are a manager talking to an employee, you might only listen to hear if they finished the project. You hear them say, "The project is done," and you completely filter out the fact that their voice sounded exhausted, burnt out, and miserable. You got the data you wanted, but you completely missed the human being in front of you. The cure: listen to the music, not just the lyrics. Intention requires you to process the whole message, the facts, the emotions, and the body language. Judging is the ultimate killer of empathy. If someone starts speaking, and you instantly label them in your head, "He's lazy, she's overreacting, he doesn't know what he's talking about," you have slammed the iron gate shut. The moment you judge someone, you stop listening to understand, and you start listening to criticize. You put yourself on a pedestal of superiority. You cannot deeply connect with someone you are simultaneously looking down upon. The cure: cultivate aggressive curiosity. Even if you completely disagree with someone, switch your brain from judgment to curiosity. Ask yourself, why does this intelligent human being believe this so strongly? What experiences led them to this conclusion? When you replace judgment with curiosity, defensiveness melts away, and true listening begins. Chapter 4: The Fix-It Reflex. If you are an intelligent, proactive person, especially if you work in a corporate environment like finance or management, you have been trained your entire life to identify inefficiencies and solve problems. When your partner or your friend comes to you with a problem, your brain automatically treats them like a broken spreadsheet. You analyze the data, find the error, and offer a strategic solution. And then, you are completely baffled when they get angry at you. They say, "You aren't listening to me." You reply, "I am listening. I just gave you the perfect solution to your problem." Why does this happen? We must return to the neuroscience we discussed in our emotional intelligence masterclass. When a person is highly stressed, anxious, or grieving, their logical brain, the neocortex, is shut down. They are operating entirely out of their emotional brain, the amygdala. When you offer a logical solution, just tell your boss no, or just organize your calendar better, you are trying to speak to a logical brain that is temporarily turned off. Furthermore, offering a quick solution often sends a terrible, subconscious message. It says, "Your pain makes me uncomfortable, and I want it to stop. Here is a quick fix so I don't have to deal with your emotions anymore." It minimizes their suffering. It treats their complex human experience like a simple math equation. Patrick King establishes the golden rule of emotional communication. You must soothe the emotional brain before you can speak to the logical brain. Before you can offer a single piece of advice, the other person must feel that their emotions have been fully seen, heard, and legitimized. They do not want you to pull them out of the dark hole immediately. They want you to climb down into the dark hole, sit next to them in the dirt, and say, "You're right. It is really dark down here." Only after they feel completely understood will their logical brain turn back on. Only then will they be ready to ask for, and receive, a solution. If you try to fix before you connect, you will fail every single time. Chapter 5, Validation and Toxic Positivity. If you cannot offer a solution, what are you supposed to do? You must master the art of validation. Validation is the act of recognizing, affirming, and legitimizing someone else's emotional experience. It is the verbal confirmation that their feelings make sense. A massive misconception blocks people from validating others. People think that if they validate an emotion, they are agreeing with the person's actions. This is false. You do not have to agree with someone's behavior to validate their emotion. Imagine your coworker screams at a client, and then comes to you crying, saying, "I am so stressed, I couldn't handle the pressure." You do not have to agree that screaming at the client was the right thing to do. You validate the emotion underneath the behavior. You say, "I know how much pressure you have been under this quarter. It makes complete sense that you felt incredibly overwhelmed today." You validated the stress. You made them feel human. The opposite of validation is a cultural disease known as toxic positivity. Because we are terrified of negative emotions, we try to cheer people up using toxic positivity. We use phrases that begin with the most dangerous words in the English language, "at least." "I lost my job today." Well, at least you have your health. "I didn't get into the MBA program." At least you can try again next year. Everything happens for a reason. When you say, "at least," you are entirely invalidating their pain. You are telling them that they shouldn't be sad, because things could be worse. You are robbing them of their right to grieve. Patrick King teaches that true empathy does not begin with, "at least." True empathy begins with, "it makes sense." When someone shares pain with you, delete the platitudes. Do not try to find the silver lining. Acknowledge the reality of the darkness. Use these 3 pillars of validation. 1. Acknowledge the emotion. It sounds like you are feeling completely betrayed. 2. Normalize the emotion. Anyone in your situation would feel exactly the same way. 3. Offer presence, not solutions. "I am so sorry this is happening. I am here for you." When you validate a human being, you do not fix their problem. You do something much more powerful, you eliminate their loneliness. Chapter 6, The Mechanics of Active Listening. Validation is the philosophy. But how do you actually execute it in real time, during a fast-paced, intense conversation? You must transition from a passive listener into an active listener. Active listening means you are not just silently absorbing information like a sponge. You are actively participating in the process of comprehension. You are giving the speaker constant, verbal proof that you are following their every word. Patrick King outlines 3 specific, clinical mechanics to execute active listening flawlessly. The Active Listening Toolkit. Do not use all 3 of these techniques in every single sentence, or you will sound like a robot. Use them strategically, like a master craftsman, to guide the conversation deeper and prove your absolute engagement. 1. The echo, the mirror technique. When the speaker pauses, simply repeat the last 3 words they said, or the 3 most critical words of their sentence, with an inquisitive tone. Speaker, and then my boss told me the project was completely cancelled without any warning. You, without any warning. This invisible psychological trick forces the speaker to elaborate, and proves you are listening to the exact details of their story. 2. The paraphrase, the synthesis. After they have spoken for a few minutes, you must pause the conversation and synthesize their data in your own words. So, what you are saying is that you spent 3 weeks building the financial model, and then the client completely changed the parameters at the last. 2. Rendering the work useless. When you paraphrase accurately, the speaker experiences a massive rush of relief. They realize, wow. They actually understand my reality. 3. Labeling the emotion, the empathy hack. This is the ultimate master-level skill. You do not just listen to the facts, you identify the invisible emotion underneath the facts and pin a label on it. It sounds to me like you are feeling incredibly disrespected by how this was handled. If you label it correctly, the speaker will feel deeply validated. If you label it incorrectly, the speaker will simply correct you, which still deepens the conversation. There is one final, crucial mechanic to active listening that requires no words at all. The 3-second pause. In modern conversation, the exact millisecond someone finishes their sentence, we instantly begin speaking. It creates a frantic, anxious rhythm. Patrick King demands that you introduce the pause. When the other person finishes speaking, simply close your mouth, maintain eye contact, and count to 3 in your head. 1. 2. 3. 2 miraculous things happen during that pause. First, it proves to the speaker that you were actually listening to them, rather than just rehearsing your own response. It shows that you are taking a moment to digest their heavy words. Second, 80% of the time, the speaker will actually fill that silence themselves. They will go deeper. They will reveal the core truth that they were too nervous to say in their first sentence. Silence is not empty. In the hands of a master listener, silence is a vacuum that pulls the absolute truth out of the other person. Chapter 7, Nonverbal Communication. If you only listen to the vocabulary coming out of someone's mouth, you are operating entirely blind. Psychologists often refer to the famous 55/38/7 rule of communication. When we are expressing emotions, 55% of the message is conveyed through body language, 38% through vocal tone, and only a staggering 7% through the actual words we use. If a client tells you they are happy with your portfolio strategy, but their arms are crossed, their voice is high-pitched, and they won't make eye contact, which data point do you trust? The 7% of words, or the 93% of biology? A master listener trusts the biology. To read body language effectively, you cannot just memorize a dictionary of gestures. Crossing your arms does not always mean someone is defensive. Sometimes, the air conditioning is just turned up too high, and they are freezing. Patrick King teaches that to read nonverbal cues accurately, you must first establish a baseline. Within the first 5 minutes of interacting with someone, you observe their natural, relaxed state. How fast do they usually talk? How much eye contact do they naturally make? Do they use their hands when they speak, or do they keep them still? Once you have the baseline, you are no longer looking for specific gestures. You are hunting for deviations. If a normally loud, animated coworker suddenly goes perfectly still and speaks in a quiet monotone when you bring up the upcoming audit, their baseline has shattered. That deviation is a massive, flashing red alarm. Their words might say, the audit is fine, but their biology is screaming, I am terrified. When hunting for deviations, pay attention to these three invisible zones. 1. Vocal tone and cadence. When the amygdala, the emotional brain, detects a threat, the vocal cords physically tighten. The pitch of the voice often goes up, and the speed of speech accelerates due to adrenaline. A sudden shift to a fast, high-pitched voice indicates anxiety, even if the words are confident. 2. Eye contact. The dart. If someone who normally holds steady eye contact suddenly starts looking at the door, their watch, or their phone, they are experiencing a biological, flight, response. They physically want to escape the conversation. You must immediately back off and lower the pressure. 3. Pacifying behaviors. When humans feel internal stress, they subconsciously try to soothe their own nervous system. Watch for pacifying behaviors, rubbing the back of the neck, playing with jewelry, stroking their own arm, or tightly clasping their hands together. These are physical manifestations of a mind trying to comfort itself. Chapter 8, The Art of the Powerful Question. You are tracking their nonverbal cues. You are holding the space. But eventually, the conversation will stall. To guide the other person deeper into their own truth, you must ask questions. However, most people ask terrible questions. We ask questions to lead the witness. We ask questions to satisfy our own curiosity. We ask questions to subtly insert our own opinions. Patrick King reveals that a master listener uses questions not to trap the speaker, but to unlock them. The most dangerous question word in the English language is, why. When you ask someone a why question, you almost instantly trigger their defensive, fight or flight response. Think about how it feels to be asked. Why did you do that? Why are you so upset? Why did you format the financial report this way? Why forces the person to justify their existence. It forces them to defend their logic. It sounds like an accusation, even if you didn't mean it that way. To become a master listener, you must delete why and replace it with what or how. Instead of, why are you so upset? Ask, what is it about this situation that is bothering you the most? Instead of, why did you format the report this way? Ask, how did you approach structuring this data? What and how questions are exploratory. They invite the person to look at their own problem objectively alongside you, rather than feeling attacked by you. The funnel of inquiry. To truly unlock a closed-off personality, you must guide them using a sequence known as the funnel of inquiry. You cannot start with deep, invasive questions. You must start wide and slowly funnel down to the core truth. 1. The open-ended entry, broad and safe. Begin at the widest part of the funnel. Ask questions that cannot be answered with a simple yes or no. Give them absolute freedom to steer the narrative. Ask, what was the highlight of the conference, or how has your week been going? Let them choose the territory. 2. The probing question, hunting for detail. Once they have chosen a topic, listen for the emotional spikes or the deviations. Then, probe deeper into that specific area. If they mention a difficult client, ask, how did that client's reaction impact the rest of your day, or what was the hardest part of that negotiation for you? 3. The clarifying capstone, the core truth. At the bottom of the funnel, you distill their complex, emotional ramble into a crystal clear reality. You use closed questions not to trap them, but to confirm your deep understanding. Ask, so, moving forward, the most important thing for you is that the team respects your boundaries, is that right? When you ask powerful, non-judgmental questions, you stop being a conversational narcissist. You become a conversational architect. You build a safe structure for the other person to walk through, discovering their own answers along the way. Chapter 9, The Platinum Rule. We arrive at the final, ultimate paradigm shift of Patrick King's philosophy. If you master this single concept, it will forever change how you interact with humanity. Since kindergarten, we have all been taught the ultimate law of human morality, the golden rule. Treat others the way you want to be treated. It sounds beautiful. It sounds righteous. But Patrick King points out a massive, hidden flaw in the golden rule. The golden rule is inherently egocentric. It assumes that everyone in the world wants the exact same things, communicates in the exact same way, and processes emotion the exact same way that you do. Imagine you are an incredibly analytical, data-driven finance manager. When you are stressed out, you like to be left entirely alone to look at spreadsheets and solve the problem in silence. Your highly emotional, extroverted partner comes home from work, devastated and crying because they had a terrible day. If you apply the golden rule, treating them how you want to be treated, you will leave them entirely alone in the living room, assuming they need space to process. Your partner will feel completely abandoned, unloved, and ignored. Why? Because they do not want to be left alone. They want to be hugged. They want to talk for 2 hours. The golden rule failed because you projected your own psychological needs onto a completely different human being. A master listener abandons the golden rule and embraces the platinum rule. The platinum rule states, treat others the way they want to be treated. This requires a massive leap of empathy. It requires you to step completely outside of your own ego, your own preferences, and your own operating system. You must look at the person across from you and ask, what is their language? What do they need right now? Conclusion, the final mastery. You have reached the end of the methodology. Look at the psychological evolution you have undergone over these 3 masterclass sessions. You are no longer a fake listener, waiting impatiently for your turn to speak. You have recognized the toxic epidemic of conversational narcissism, choosing to abandon the ego-driven shift response and embrace the selfless power of the support response. You have torn down the invisible gates of your own mind, refusing to mind read, rehearse, filter, or judge the human beings in front of you. You have put down the wrench. You know that offering a logical solution to an emotional brain is a recipe for conflict. You have eradicated the poison of toxic positivity, choosing instead to offer profound validation, affirming that their darkness makes sense. You have mastered the clinical mechanics of active listening, using the echo, the paraphrase, and the label to prove your absolute comprehension, while harnessing the gravity of the 3-second pause. And you are now a master of the unseen. You know how to read the silent biology of nonverbal deviations. You have banished the judgmental why, replacing it with the powerful questions of the funnel of inquiry. And above all, you have abandoned the ego of the golden rule. You now live by the platinum rule, adapting your communication to fulfill the unique psychological needs of the person sitting across from you. We live in a world that is desperate to be heard. Look around you. People are shouting on social media, arguing in boardrooms, and fighting in their living rooms, all because they feel utterly, profoundly invisible. Patrick King has handed you the ultimate antidote to the loneliness of the modern age. Listening is not a passive act of hearing words. Listening is the active, intentional, beautiful art of making another human being feel seen, valued, and safe. When you strip away your own ego, when you stop trying to fix everyone, and when you simply hold the space for someone else's truth, you do not just become a better communicator. You become a healer. Thank you for listening. Please like, share, comments, and subscribe my channel.